Sir?
Arsene, if you could choose your successor, who would it be? I'm not wishing you out of a job.
Yeah, cool.
Just put you on the rope straight away. Huh?
That's good.
You know the story of a manager who goes to see the doctor and asks him, how do I live longer? And the doctor said to him, stop to manage straight away, stop to drink, stop to smoke. And the manager tells him, but do you guarantee that I will live longer? And the doctor says, no, not at all, but it will feel much longer. Since I got that advice, I decided to stay in the job.
That's great, man.
That's a great story. And the answer to the question is...
Can't answer that one, can I?
You're not going to answer it. Yeah. Bruce Rioch, anybody? No? Bring him back. Signing, if you remember who. You don't want to answer that. Should we move on? You look at you. Oh my God! Give me the eyes.
No, the next manager. I don't know. It's not my job. My job is if I can help somebody to settle well in, yes. But I think it's a responsibility of the board to choose the next manager. It's in fact I work. I don't know how the others work. You have to watch on a daily basis how people behave. You know, I would like somebody who comes in and gets the club to the next level and. Hopefully the club will manage to do that. I just want to make sure that the guy who comes in after me is in a condition where he can work well. That means I leave behind me a good team with a good financial situation and a club in a good, with good young prospects. That's what I try to do.
Yeah. And do you think the next manager will have a different structure? I think the hierarchy might be different to the current?
Certainly the time today has gone where manager is deciding everything. Certainly that will not exist anymore, this type of manager. I even think that today I have about 20 people around me. I manage a team around the team. And one of the challenges of the manager today in the modern game is to get a team around the team, because the team, as with our former players, they smell quickly when there's not a united attitude around, you know, and they take advantage of it. And one of the challenges today is, in fact, to have a unified team, because many people mean many opinions. And in our game, you can have many opinions. And on some subjects, the groundsman can be right and I can be wrong. Maybe out of 50 times, I will be more often right than he is. But in some subjects, he can be right, because it's all subjective at the end of the day. It's opinions.
The groundsman signed Yaya Sonogo, I'm just saying. Moving on. Quick, what? Don't interrupt me.
He is world champion of the under-20, I would say that.
He's brilliant player. Just another time he'll be back. Somebody else to ask a question quickly. Yes, sir.
I think most people in this room would agree that years in the past 100 years were in your first 6 to 7 years. But what were your favourite and least favourite matches post 2006?
That's I remember.
8-2.
Well, yes, there are so many least favourite matches. I would say that every defeat is a nightmare.
Quite similar. We're going to go down the panel now, just so it's not Arsene Wenger Q and A for the next 15 minutes. So we will come back to Arsene, but we've got so many fascinating voices to hear in the next few minutes. So in order, one for Les. Sir Les. Yes, sir.
If you could just set the record straight, when you played for Spurs, your first time back at Newcastle, I believe you were 5 minutes late coming out of the changing rooms with Rolf Fox. Can you just explain what was going on there?
It was well, in the Newcastle changing rooms there's toilets, and I was sitting in one cubicle and Rolf Fox was sitting in the other. And we were discussing the game. We were saying, well, listen, we need to do this, we need to do that, just through the cubicle sort of thing. As you do. And then all of a sudden I said to Raul, hey Raul, it's a little bit quiet out there, isn't it? So we both flushed the train and went out, and I went, bloody hell, shows how well we must have been playing. They've gone out. So we went down the stairs, and the game was going on. They were playing with 8 men.
That is brilliant. That is actually brilliant. Question for the rest of our panellists.
But, you know, for so many footballers, actually, even nowadays when they earn so much, post-football can be very difficult. So many players struggle to come to terms with the lack of the team camaraderie, the lack of fame, the lack of fans saluting you for whatever you may or may not do. They go into something else. They're used to a certain standard of living. They continue to have that standard of living, and then the money runs out. I think there's some staggering statistic of 70-odd% divorce rates for players that finish within their first 5 years. And a lot of them have problems. So, you know, I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have had the life in the game and continue to have it around the game that I've had. So, you know, for some it's better than others. But I guess that's just the way of the world. But the truth is, in football, once you get to your early 30s, you know, your time begins to run out. You've got to work out something else that you can do, because there's a hell of a lot of life left after football, however much you may earn in the sport.
Okay. Question for our other panellists before we come back to Arsene, because he'll be going in 12 minutes. Yes. Yes, sir, with the glasses.
So, of course, the Premier League is 25 years old this year. In what ways do you believe that the league has changed over those 25 years?
Well, I think the quality is considerable. I think the Bosman ruling has had a extremely positive effect in a number of ways, and I think that's enabled clubs now to get the very best players from Europe. Because I think I made the point before, I think it's been detrimental to the national team. However, I think the quality has been exceptional. There's no doubt about that. The development has been very, very good. One of my biggest disappointments, I think, seeing what's happened at the top level, I look at young players, and I think, you know, there is an attitude at times that young players, I come from old school, and I can't, you know, speak for some of the guys here, but when they went back to the old apprenticeship days, I think it was very important, because you learnt values. And during the apprenticeship, you know, you had to, you know, clean the loos, do the wash. All those things made you a better person. So you had more appreciation than when you made it then as a player. And I think that's one of the biggest differences now. There's such a lot just for potential. And the truth of the matter is, if you look at the journey of a young player from 10 till 16, 99% are not going to get a scholarship. If you look from 16 to 19, 90% is not going to get a professional contract. If you look from 19 to 21, 0.25% are only still in the game. So I just think that, you know, we need to get a better balance, a better equilibrium. And I think young players, you know, I've got children, I love my children more than life. And, you know, you want to give them love, the best education, of course you can. But if you give them everything so materially, you know, it creates so much complacency. And I think that's been one of my biggest negatives, that the scale of investment in the game, we've discussed about Neymar at the top level. I think the mediocrity in the Premier League gets too much. That's been the detriment to the development for young players. And I think the young players who are just potential, they get so much and they lose that hunger, they lose that desire. And I think that's been the downside of the huge economic upside. But I think overall, if you look at the journey of the Premier League, if you look at the audiences, if you look where it was, it's been absolutely spectacular. And I think the quality now, I don't think it's technically as good as Spain. I don't think it's technically as good as Germany, in my opinion. But I think it provides so many other different elements in terms of excitement, in terms of passion. We've got a tremendous integrity in our game that I don't see anywhere else, basically in the rest of Europe. So I think there's been a huge upside.
I think Arsene wants to come into that, yeah?
Please do.
Can I just echo that? I would say one of the other things which I find really encouraging, having sort of covered football in the whole Premier League era, is the empowering of players. And we look at it and they shoot, they become corporations and all the money they're getting, and we've sort of maybe approached that from a negative perspective. But I think it's fantastic that footballers now have a voice, whether it's Gary on social media or on programmes. I just think it's brilliant because
I think Theresa May might disagree.
25 years ago, football was fairly feudal, and you would almost have owners and players going in different entrances, and players weren't invited up to the boardrooms. And I think it's brilliant. Les is in a position of power. Paul, the work he does in the game. So many footballers, the players who I grew up admiring, now they're not sort of just disappearing off into the ether. They're actually influencing public life. I've met a few politicians. I've met quite some very interesting people. There's no one I have met who is as socially mobile as Rio Ferdinand. Rio Ferdinand can go into Downing Street and everyone will listen to him. Rio Ferdinand can go into places that politicians can't go. He can go into estates in Peckham and talk to people there about knife crime. And I think the empowering of these players that I admired and always admired as sportsmen, and now I'm seeing them empowered as individuals. And I would love to see individuals on this panel go into the higher echelons of the FA, go into Downing Street, go into Whitehall. The French have a very good scheme. They take a player like Lilian Thuram and they say, right, can you shape the sporting future in Arsenal? Shape policy. So let these individuals who fought their way to the top through difficult circumstances, many of them, let's empower them more and give them more role, not just in shaping the sport, but in shaping the country.
One other quick point as well, if you don't mind me adding, that the way players now, I think, are very, very generous. I mean, they've got their foundations now. The majority of players, they give so much back to the game, and they actually deserve a lot more credit than what they get. You see a lot of, I've seen so many of the African players, the investment that they put back into their respective country is so admirable. You see players like Steven Gerrard, you see players, that have testimonials. Wayne Rooney give away £2-3 million pounds, from their whole proceedings to charity, to the local communities. So I think that's a huge, that we'll call that corporate social responsibility side of football, where a lot of our top players, Arsenal's got players they give away. They have a particular day, Arsenal, and they donate a percentage of their salaries, don't they, to give causes. So I think, unfortunately, that doesn't generate as much media as it should, because that's not, what everybody wants to read. But
there's
in
Michael Carrick's testimonial as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So right across the game, right across the country, I think individually and collectively, the good causes, so many professionals going to prisons, they talk to young people about empowering them, giving them confidence, to give them faith, give them belief, So I think that's a part of a game that players deserve a lot more credit, and unfortunately they don't get.
Certainly some of them, like sort of Juan Mata, high profile. I know you wanted to come in on that.
Just want to say how Paul spoke about is how terrible the selection is for young people. To give you a number, between 16 and 20, people are professional. 67% of them are not anymore in football at the age of 21. Yeah, that's right. And not even in football anymore.
At all.
At all.
They go off the rails, don't they, also, in their whole life.
And that is already the elite of the elite, the guys who are in the academies, that shows you how difficult it is. And I would say as well, the other thing that we noticed by making the psychological profile of the young boys is that the stamina in the motivation is more important than the intensity of the motivation. That means those who resist to frustration, when a guy has a low rate, for example, 0 to 10, if there's a 2 or 3 in stamina of the motivation, he doesn't survive. Because you have to deal with frustration, with disappointment, with not being selected, and still keep going. And those who keep going make it.
I remember Harry Kane was described by his youth coach at Tottenham as being the runt of the litter. Because he was, and he means it now as a compliment because of what he's done. Yeah, that's how he was described, because he, at the time, all his stats were, he was the slowest, he wasn't the best at anything or anywhere approaching. But the coach said, I just felt there was something in his character that I could easily have just let him go by the wayside. And I just wanted to stay with him just to see how he progressed. And cut a very long story short, we know where we are with that particular runt of the litter. So,
the top scoring runt.
Yeah.
But you have plenty of players here. At some stage, it is a meeting of an attitude. All these guys, they have been questioned, will he make it or not? And you had people who said, no, he will never make it. But they kept going, and at some stage, when you have the attitude, you meet somebody, I give you a chance. And that is always a meeting between an attitude and somebody who gives you a chance in life. That's absolutely 100% for everybody.
So you got your chance at Nancy as well, wasn't it? As a manager, they saw
Exactly.
something in you and you got your chance from there. But Arsene has only got a few more minutes, so if we can make it slightly quick fire, we won't have time for long answers now. If you could do a couple of quick fire questions for Arsene. You're desperate, so go. To ask a question.
Hi, Arsene. So there's many questions, had I ever had the opportunity, and I will be quick, don't worry, that I could have asked you, would I have the opportunity, but the main one I want to ask you was, given the divisiveness within the Arsenal fan base that I know you are aware of, and I know that, and you say that it doesn't affect you, and I fully believe that it doesn't affect you, but from the valid of the, you know, the waving of a banner to the frankly ridiculous of the flying of a plane, to what extent did that have an impact on the Arsenal squad last season?
I would say more maybe my attitude had an impact on the season, because at some stage the players came to see me and said, "What's going on, boss? Where do you go?" I created with my not deciding a lack of clarity in the dressing room, and there's nothing worse than that in the dressing room. You know, when the players, when you're not half completely in, or the players feel you're not completely in, it's difficult to tell them we go. So at some stage I had to tell them, "Look, guys, I'm with you, but we have to win games." And
so you genuinely didn't know towards the latter stages of the season whether you would stay or not. Sorry to interrupt, but I just find that interesting.
Yeah, I didn't.
Because you kind of admitted to the public that you knew what you were going to do, but you weren't prepared to tell anyone yet. But,
no.
But in essence, you didn't actually, you hadn't made your mind up fully.
No.
No.
And the fact that I have not decided to stay or to go created uncertainty in the dressing room. And then when you don't win a game, you know, there were some other problems.
If I can ask you one more question, in 2 years' time, are you going to stay or are you going to go?
I don't know.
Was it a change at boardroom level, do you think? Was it something board related that influenced your decision in the end?
No, it was linked to the fact that, you know, I felt that you always wonder, am I the right man to continue to do the job? And as well, I want to work. What I do when I faced, for example, opposition or unhappiness, I try to focus on what I think is important in the game and work harder and question myself, what can I improve, and move on from there. But I cannot say I'm immune to criticism. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be loved by the fans. But when it doesn't happen, you have still to fight. When we come back to the motivation, to the resistance to stress, it's an important quality in a modern game. Resistance to stress and manage to keep your motivation at a high level.
Gary's just hoping your motivation's not too high for this Friday night, because it's just a couple of days away. Really couple of very, very quick ones, not too in-depth if you don't mind. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just for Mr. Wenger, I was just wondering, so I don't think anyone would doubt that you brought a particularly good brand of football to the UK. When you look at someone like Mourinho, whose football, in my layman's terms, is very much more functional, how do you feel about that in terms of what you've achieved, but then what he's achieving now? So people would argue that he's winning trophies with that functional football. But you're playing very attractive football. How do you feel about that when people criticise the type of football Arsenal playing?
Well, I believe that in life you can only, nobody has all the qualities. I have my deficiencies, and Mourinho has his deficiencies certainly as well. And you can only work with what you think you love and what is right for you. You know what is adjusted to your personality. I'm a guy who likes his team to play, and that's what I believe is right in the game. After that, I'm not a defensive guy so much in my mind, and that's why I can. If tomorrow I give a different language to my team, I will be bad. You know. On the other hand, I must say, since in 2006 to 2015, the landscape has changed because we were in financial restrictions, and a lot of money has come into the English game. And today, people don't take a distance with what happened because it's we had less money. We had to sell our best players, and the other team strengthened their team with our players sometimes. And but the demands were exactly the same. So I must say, honestly, 2006 to 15 I've never worked so much, and much more than in the first years, and have been less successful on winning titles. But it was a very difficult period, because when I signed for 5 years, because the banks, when you build the stadium, demanded that the manager signs for 5 years. And we had no guarantee to pay back, and I did it, and I went to the end of the contract because I wanted to respect my challenge. But it was difficult because the demands were still very high, and the resources were lower. But I'm very, very happy and very proud that I did it, because I was as well lucky to work with what I think is right in the game, with with freedom. I could work with freedom.
Okay, one more for Arsene. You promise it's going to be a quick one, okay, because then he's got to go. Okay.
As a football fan, Arsene, thank you for all you've contributed to the Premier League over the years.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Particularly the players that you brought to the Premier League early on. It's not directly a question to you, but for the panel as a whole, when do you think the Premier League will see its first female manager?
Wow. Here we have one.
I like asking questions more than answering them, that's for sure.
No, there's an interesting experience in France where Corinne Diacre, a French manager, manages in the second league for now 3 years, and she does extremely well. So I personally am convinced that will happen soon.
In this country?
In this country.
Who?
Yeah, because I see the evolution. Yesterday I had a meeting with the League Managers Association. I told them it would be interesting to make a prospective study of where our job will go, because I'm convinced that in 10, 15 years will not necessarily be a football specialist who will be the manager of a club. Yeah. That he will have so many scientists around him who will bring out the team to play on Saturday, how to manage, and it will be more management specialist than a football specialist, because the football decisions will be made by technological analysis. And that does mean that it's not forbidden for a girl to imagine to be at the head of a department like that.
For what it's worth, if there was to be a female manager in, say, the Football League, my money would be on the Chelsea manager, Emma Hayes, because she doesn't take any... And she's got a strong personality, put it that way, as well as a successful team at Chelsea. Kolasinac seems fun, doesn't he? He's got a big character, hasn't he? Yeah. We were at Wembley at the... Well, you were there, I think.
You know,
I was there. I think you were there. I didn't see you, but...
You know, that shows as well that you do not necessarily need to spend 300 million to get a good player.
Especially on a fullback, hey, Arsene Wenger, thank you so much for joining us. It has been... Thank you so much.